In this show, we have the luxury of having two dynamic leaders, Dr. Christina Grange and Dr. Leroy Reese. They're here with us today to help us unpack dodging dangerous parenting dynamics. We've learned a lot of important stuff in this episode thus far. And as we continue, as we come back to the show, Dr. Tarver, I'd just like to know, when we talked about the Syl versus Heidi Klum kind of issue earlier. Are you noticing in the practice that kids are being kind of tossed in the middle or throw the baby out with the bathwater, so to speak, because the adults are being so engaged in some sort of problem? What are you seeing?
Unfortunately, I see my clients being the ones to be manipulative, to withhold visitation from the parent. I know Dr. Reese doesn't like that word, to withhold the opportunity for kids to be able to see both of their parents. And they are because, I don't feel like you're paying enough child support, or you're not paying child support, or I'm upset that you started a new relationship with someone. And so you're not going to have that person around my child. Or you are I'm monitoring your social media pages and seeing that you're posting things with your other children and not with my child. So I'm upset about that, and I'm posting ugly remarks about you on my social media pages. Or I see a lot of the negative, especially around this time of year where it's back to school. I see a lot of negative comments from parents about their other co-parent and them not doing, and they're not providing. You're going to show up, they'll tag them, they'll tag their friends. So unfortunately, I see the people who do really, really destructive things, and they will say it is because they don't want their kids to have to deal with their mom or their dad, but it's not. It's much like Dr. Reese and Dr. Grange stated earlier. It's about this hurt and about this fear and about this pain that's unmanaged. And now I'm just utilizing this child as a way to spread this vitriol, if you will, about my co-parent. And so I would like to pose to Dr. Grange and Dr. Reese, what are the effects of that? So what happens when because I'm old enough to be on social media, or if I'm not, I'm seeing some of my family members' social media pages, and I know my parent is saying these ugly things about my co-parent. I know that I'm not seeing my mom or my dad in the way that I want to, and it's easy for me to overhear a parent talking about the other one and know that you're withholding my time from my parent. What are some of the negative effects of that on children, and what are some ways that we can just manage that in a healthier way, as opposed to using the children, as you stated earlier, Dr. Reese, as pawns in this situation to be able to get some kind of response from our co-parent? How can we just be better with those dynamics? Sorry, I'll start with you, Dr. Reese.
Okay. So I'd start my response to that question with, remember your kids love both of you. And just like you may be injured because of what happened that caused the separation or the termination of the relationship, when you act out against somebody that child loves, you are also causing an injury to that child. And it lingers. I mean, it left unattended, it becomes cancerous in a way, in that it can metastasize in all domains of this kid's life, academic, social, emotional. So that when you see behavior that you think is atypical, hey, what's going on here? What's wrong with you? Like, what's happening? But you have lost. You're not remembering that you heard, that this kid heard you call their other parent everything but a child of God earlier in the week, or has seen, to your point, has seen the social media, or better yet, the kid's friends have seen the social media and has now come to school and is saying, hey man, what's up with your people? Why your mom's talking about your dad like a such and such and such and such? Or what's up with your pops talking about your mom like that? And that's sometimes something that the parents are completely unaware of because the kid may not share it. But again, that affects them emotionally and socially and academically. And it's one of the, frankly, the dangers of social media. I think that we have the technological tools that we have yet to mature to a point where we can consistently use them responsibly, because sometimes those become the daggers that we throw at each other. Those become the bullets that we hit each other with, that cause lasting damage. And so, the what do you do? One of the things I often recommend, particularly for parents who are amenable to it, not everybody's ready to do this work, but I will recommend co-parenting therapy. And co-parenting therapy is not therapy. We're not talking about how we resolve or talk through or work through the issues that led to the demise of the relationship. But we're talking about practically how we work together to make decisions as it relates to the well-being and interest of our child who's picking them up from school. Hey, I'm going to pay for this extracurricular. You know what? I've got to travel for business this week. Can the kids stay with you? Those kind of things. Because one of the things I talk to parents about is you're passionate about your kids, but when the relationship ends, you need to learn how to be dispassionate in dealing with the other parent. Because if you bring the emotion to the table, you're going to remember all the hurt. And now really what it is something transactional. I mean, that's not optimal, but minimally it's something transactional. Hey, we got to get the kids together for school. We got to get the kids together for their extracurriculars. Hey, who's picking? Those become the kind of things. And when parents can do that work, that allows them to focus on the day-to-day kind of realities and learn and get reminders like, hey, this stuff is out of bounds. You got a problem with what the other parent did. I oftentimes will recommend to parents that are in this situation that they have a once a week or once every other week, 30-minute check-in. It's hard to get in trouble in 30 minutes, but not impossible. Where we check in about what are the kinds of things that we need to be talking about that's going on in the kid's life, that either you or I have to kind of talk about what we're managing. And so those we get real practical. And if we can focus on the work that has to get done, it becomes a little harder to get caught up into this other stuff. But again, this is where our village becomes important. Dude, take that stuff down now. Like, we have to hold each other accountable for when we are less than our best self.
Dr. Grange, I see your wheels are turning. I appreciate your response, Dr. Reese, to that, about how we have to think about what we're saying and how it impacts our kids if we're, again, doing what's in the best interest, and also where people can come in when we don't see that we're being harmful, that'll say to us, hey, cut it out. Take that down. That's not okay. That's unacceptable. Dr. Grange?
Yeah, I think that when we think about the outcomes for the children, when we see that kind of unhealthy communication, something that I think about and that I've seen, unfortunately, is that the way that you treat that other parent may be how your child ends up treating you. And we don't want that, because we're modeling it, right? This is someone you cared about, and look how you're treating them. And we can't deny those facts. And so that, to me, is the hardest and most painful outcome for the parent, whoever has engaged in the unhealthy communication, and for the child, because they learn how to fight. They learn how to hurt people who they love, even, because, as has been stated by Dr. Reese, they do love their parents, but that doesn't mean they won't.
I'm trying to write all this down. Keep going. Just.
So I think that is, honestly, when you ask that question, that's what I feel in my heart, because that's what I've seen parents saying, why is my child acting like this? And sometimes you need to do a hard pause and let them think about how they got to this place, and remind them if you've had that kind of relationship with them. So I think there can be, as far as negative outcomes, a lack of trust that develops, because, again, if you if you don't currently love in some form this person and you're treating them like that, what does this mean? How might you treat me one day, right? Also, a lack of respect, because this idea of I'm showing you, right? I might tell you what to do, which may be different than what I'm showing you. And children, especially, I work with a lot of adolescents as they evolve into adolescence, they call you on it quickly. And it can create a lot of tension within the family because there's the, well, you said this and you said that, and that's how you talk to, you know, such and such other parent. So again, we are creating the story, or the parents are creating the story for their child that their child may replicate. Their child may end up being what, the sequel to whatever it was that they started with that parent. So we want to avoid that and intervene on that as much as possible. And co-parenting therapy can help with that if people are ready, have healed enough in terms of their own work to come to the table in a collaborative way and really do that true co-parenting instead of parallel parenting, for example. And there are tools for that. One is schools are communicating with parents more and more via technology. So there's emails, there's Remind apps. Both parents can be signed up for that. So the parent, whoever feels not engaged, can initiate engagement, can be empowered by contacting the school and making sure they're involved. If there is a tendency towards poor communication due to where the individuals are emotionally in their relationship, then you can, as Dr. Reese said, make it more transactional, which may not feel warm and fuzzy, but it gets the job done if it's done well in terms of communicating in a way that gets the needs of the child met. What I've seen in relationships is that things don't have to stay bad, but they may be bad right now. So we have to maximize the resources available to get through this season. And hopefully after we have some distance, some emotional distance, and sometimes we can get that by using technology, we can get to the point where maybe we can be a little bit more friendly to each other at a birthday party. Maybe our exchanges of the child from one parent's home to another, maybe that doesn't have to be so cold. But the reality is that these relationships go through phases, just like all relationships do. And so giving some space for that to happen can be really helpful. So utilizing the technology, schedules, right? If you don't want to have to communicate about every little thing that's due or every little special activity, you can have a shared calendar. That works for some people, that doesn't work for other people. I think it's our job as providers to help them remember what tools exist and help them decide which tools work for them, reminding them continuously that your children are watching you constantly. And as much as you intend to only communicate a certain way in front of the child, it's probably better to have just a more generally healthy form of communication because they're watching you so much when you think they're not, and they're picking up on all of it. Even if they don't remember the details, they may remember the energy that's been exchanged between the parents, even if they don't always remember the words. And sometimes that can be just as potent for how that plays out for them later in life when they're in your house, as well as when they're not in your house.
Thank you, Dr. Grange. I think you read my mind and kind of got into the next question on in your response to that. I'm hearing you both say that kids can be very much impacted by the venom they can see between their parents, start acting in similar ways to their parents, start engaging in behaviors very similar to that. But also this piece about now other people are being invited into this dynamic. So your peers at school are now aware of what's going on in your home and how that's going to affect you academically, or other people in your community are now aware of something that they should not be privy to. I think that does lead into this next question of how do we stop manipulation from occurring? When we have children who may feel caught in the middle, they recognize their parents aren't in a good space. And so they're trying to capitalize on that. Like, hey, how can I maybe get some more benefits from the fact that you two don't communicate very well? How can I not share information that I don't really want to share with you two that might interfere with you actually both being able to parent me in the most effective way? What are some strategies that you all might recommend for increasing healthy communication patterns? And also Dr. Grange got into how we can share information more effectively, but how we set healthy boundaries and make sure that they're in both households if the co-parents aren't in the same space. And I'll start with you, Dr. Reese, on that one.
I think that's Dr. Grange's turn to go first. But I can. I want to reflect on something that Dr. Green said. She said right now. And I think that one of the things we want to leave your listeners with is change is possible. Healing is possible. Different is possible. And I think we've been talking about some of the problems around some of these unhealthy dynamics. It may in fact be a moment in time. And I think that's really important, that through effort, commitment, dedication to different, that we can get different. So I wanted to emphasize that point. I think with respect to this idea of manipulation, one of the things that we know stops manipulation in terms of its impact is when we stop responding to the manipulation. When we can identify the behavioral patterns that is the manipulation, and we don't respond it in the expected way, so that the desired effect of the manipulation does not occur. I do work with families, and one of the things I made reference to parental alienation. And for many parents, what happens with the other parent is they are incredibly consistent with how they respond and how they act. In most situations, you can predict with a high degree of confidence how this person is going to respond to your request, how they're going to act in this situation, whatever. And it may, the conscious or unconscious, leaving for the benefit of the doubt, intent may be to trigger you, right? Like, I'm going to do this because this will piss you off and da da da. But when you understand that they are consistent about that, you become dispassionate in how you respond to that. It loses its ability to have the desired effect on you, which is the cascading thing that once the manipulation starts and we respond, everybody's playing their parts the way they're supposed to be playing their parts. And now we've got a you-know-what show. But it just takes one person in that play to act differently. Like, oh, okay, I see what this is about. I'm not going to respond. Sometimes that person needs to get help managing their own frustration so that they don't allow themselves to get triggered. And so this is the place where therapy can be helpful. This is the place where your support group can be helpful. I mean, I do believe that there are multiple kinds of therapies. If the therapy, whatever it is in our best interest to kind of get us to manage the challenges in our life in a more effective way, let's go with it. But nonetheless, the manipulation, when we don't respond, it loses effect. And for some people, they will escalate. They'll take it up a notch. Okay, you didn't respond to that. I'm going to do this. Understand that the manipulation is about getting you to respond. And I'm a realist, and so why I don't encourage, litigation or litigious kinds of interactions. I also believe in documenting stuff. And so I'm gonna stay out of Attorney Winter's wheelhouse, but taking notes, sending yourself emails around these kinds of things, because the other thing that is a real thing, going back to the best interest of the child, is if this other person is engaging in manipulative behavior, the child is seeing it. It's having an impact on the child. In fact, the child might be the initiator of the manipulation because that's their part in this play. And so we want to take kids out of that position. So we have to be dispassionate. We can't respond, well, mama said you didn't. Well, why the hell are you talking to me about what your mama said? No. Got to see that one coming. Pump our brakes and stand there like, okay. Hey, so-and-so mentioned to me that you had some concerns about A and B. I'd be happy to talk with you if you'd like to. And then where we start to see that our kids are sliding, again, I don't encourage litigation. I think that as often as we can, we need to be talking directly to each other. Even when we're talking about playing hardball, like, hey, we either going to stop this or we're going to do something different. The courts are there to provide us recourse and relief. If we feel like it is whatever is happening is not in the interest for kids. I've been doing this too long to say that there haven't been times when the person needed to go to court to create relief for their kid. It pains me, it hurts my heart, because when you're going through that, the kid is going through that. but nonetheless, it's a real thing. So I think that the manipulation can only be effective if you respond.
That's a great point. Changing how we respond to the behavior can change the behavior that our kids are engaging in. Dr. Grange?
I would add to that in terms of our response to recognize and maybe even give voice to, especially if we're talking about the manipulation of our, like if a young person is possibly trying to do some manipulation in terms of sliding in between the parents and recognizing when there's an opportunity for them to get something they may want. I think that's some of what you were talking about. And for a child to want to get what they want is normal. It is normal for them to work towards getting their needs met according to what they think their needs are. When it comes to manipulating the relationship that's already strained between their parents, I think there's value to also being able to label that, right? To say, I recognize or I'm experiencing that as manipulation, or if you want to use a different word. And I would offer, in terms of modeling communication and modeling vulnerability, to be able to say, that makes me feel a particular way. That makes me feel as though I can't necessarily, trust you in certain situations, or that makes me feel like you may not be respecting the dynamic between your parent, the other parent, and I. So I'd really like to talk to you about how we can meet your needs without you feeling like you have to necessarily manipulate us. So being able to kind of label the emotion and empathize, saying, I know that what you're going through is difficult and you're trying to figure out where you fit in the middle of all this. Here are some other ways that we can manage that. So I think that being able to, if we're going to respond to it, tell them what we're responding to avoid some of what Dr. Reese said in terms of, what are you doing? And kind of confronting them in a way that's suboptimal. So being able to recognize what it is, empathize with them, and model how to have healthy communication so that they can stop that behavior. So I think that it helps parents to have different tools in their tool bag. So ignoring can be one, addressing it can be one, empathizing it can be one, because depending on what's going on with the child and what they're trying to get and what they've observed, we may need to use a different tool to support them in learning how to manage the situation in a different way. And to speak to something we said earlier, they may have learned manipulation. They may be using tools that we gave them. So when we see something that we don't like reflected in them, it may be an opportunity to kind of reflect on ourselves, if we can do that, and use different tools and support them in using different tools to decrease a manipulation pattern that may not be limited to parents, but could extend to other relationships that the child has, which we really don't want to encourage, right? It's already been hard enough on them. So we want to encourage them to use better tools and maybe even acknowledge better tools than the parents used as they're trying to negotiate their life, especially as they enter adolescence.
I think those are very good lessons learned. That's a great caveat to Dr. Reese's response. So, and I appreciate both of them. One of the things that I would like us to kind of really get into, Dr. Tarver, after this break is that dynamic between the mother, daughter, the mother, son, the father, daughter, the father, son, these relationships of how some of the parenting dynamics where they're tougher on each other. I'd like for us to discuss that, but we'd like to get into that right after this break. So to our listeners, you're listening and viewing In Our Own Defense podcast. In this episode, we have Dr. Reese and Dr. Grange with us, with Dr. Tarver and I, and they're helping us unpack dodging dangerous parenting dynamics. We have been discussing all of these, so we look forward to discussing more of these when we come back right after this message. Thank you. 5, 4.